welcome to We Have the Science, a show that I do with BrainBug, also known as Brian. And that was my son. Thank you, honey. And tonight we have on again PZ Myers. Thank you so much for coming. PZ, you've been here before, but just really quickly, if you want to tell us all who you are and what you do while I pour my coke.
What do I do? I don't know what I do. I grade papers. That's what I do. Yeah, I'm a biologist at the University of Minnesota Morris. My interests are in arachnids and developmental biology and evolution.
Awesome.
Yeah. Take it, Brian, for 2 seconds.
So we invited PZ because we had a conversation last time, and it kind of started going down this route where we were talking about some of the transgender issues and some of the claims made about biology when it comes to transgender issues. And we started going down that rabbit hole, and that's quite the rabbit hole. So we're like, this could be a whole segment. So we invited PZ back to try to delve into that and pick up right where we left off. So I know you've put out a couple of videos within the last year or so that cover the topic a bit. You had the one about the athletes, and then you had one where you were responding to some nasty turfs on Twitter and stuff.
Oh yeah, turfs.
Can I just say, though? Okay, so I have this thing. Like, I feel bad sometimes because I get a little mouthy, especially against hate and anti-science stuff. And I feel like, well, I'm supposed to be, I'm a science. I'm supposed to be projecting this certain, persona or whatever. But then I see someone like PZ who stands very firm in fighting against that kind of stuff, fighting against hate and just saying, anti-science stuff is bad and turfs are idiots. And I really appreciated that. That made me feel better as a scientist myself. So thank you, PZ.
Sure, yeah. Well, but I'm not unusual in that sense. There's lots of people who argue against this stuff. Yeah, and your wife just comes in. It's okay. That's great.
It's okay.
Say hello. Can you give me my fork?
Hello.
Hello.
Runs away. Yeah.
Also, I did want to say that talking about this is great, but at the same time, someone's sexuality, people shouldn't argue them about their own sexuality. That really pisses me off. So, like, sexuality is a personal thing, and I think when we do stuff like this because we're fighting against that. We're fighting against people that are trying to tell people who they are, and who they're on the inside and outside, and that's just not okay. Hate is not okay.
Although I would add, on the other side of that equation is the fact that we're not trans people, and we're
Yes.
talking, presumably favorably. We'll see. And
Yeah.
still, we're expressing an opinion about something that's very close to the lives of other human beings, and
Yeah.
we're not participating in that directly.
And we want to respect that as well. So,
Well, they do. I do think that it's important to put a message out there that you have allies to the trans community, to say that that not everybody's going to look at you in this negative light or make these unfounded assumptions about you based on that. So, yeah. I mean, as far as allyship goes, yeah, I'm with you on that. It's mostly about the scientific angle that really irritates me, because the people, they do think that the science backs up what they're saying. They think that it backs up their transphobia or just those opinions that they hold.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and what's most annoying to me too is so many of them will come out and announce that science supports their position. They don't cite papers for it, but
No.
and we're all sitting here saying, but wait, look here, here's an article in Science, here's an article in Nature, here's Scientific American. They're all coming down on the side opposite yours. So where do you come off saying that you're holding the scientific opinion here? Because you're not.
Yeah. Well, that video you did about the turfs, there were actual biologists that came out and said some of this very transphobic stuff. And I think,
Yes.
you find that in all scientific communities where there's always going to be, you have the consensus like you do in climate science. 97% of us say yes, climate science or climate change is real and it's anthropomorphic. But yet you still have, someone that may work in the community that says no, and they pick and choose their data in order to,
Right.
fit what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
With
And
climate science though, there's a almost like a the people that are saying it's not anthropogenic are the ones that have been they're basically working for fossil fuel
Yeah.
industry and getting their pockets lined that way. I don't know that there's anything equivalent to that with the people saying that science doesn't support transgenderism. I don't know what the benefit they gain from that is. I guess I can see what TERFs think they're gaining from it, and that's that they feel like their rights as women are being impeded on by accepting trans women into their fold, which is I don't understand how it's coherent, but that's the claim.
Yeah.
mhm.
In the video you talked about the athletics. One of the things that you discussed was how there are many sexual variations, but that they don't have to be in agreement. And the man that you were quoting, I can't remember his name, he had listed 9, but you said that there were a multitude of them.
Right.
Can
Yes.
you just discuss what that means exactly? How, all the sexual variations, how they don't have to be
Right.
in alignment all the time?
Well, it's kind of obvious that it's not as binary as people say. I mean, if you're going to argue that what defines a man is that he has a penis, which
Hmm.
some do, okay, that's nice. But what about the men who are XX? What about the men who do not have testes? Um, there's all these subtleties, these differences in endocrinology and physiology and all that kind of stuff that they make much of when they talk about athletes, for instance. But they seem to ignore the fact that in the general population, among all of us, there's all these great variations in, for example, testosterone levels. And those are only the obvious, easily measurable ones. There's also differences up here in our brains, right?
Hmm.
That don't universally and neatly correlate with the reproductive organs.
Yeah.
So the differences in people go round and round about this, and I'm kind of of two minds about it too. You will occasionally hear people talking about the female brain and the male brain being so radically different.
Yeah.
They're not. You dig into it, and they find things like the nucleus magnicellulus has a statistically significant difference in cell body size. And I just want to say, big whoop. You don't know what caused that or what effect it has. That there are obviously differences between men and women in very obvious ways, and it's likely that these are reflected in differences in the brain as well. But what's causal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You
yeah,
mentioned like the fact that like they want to declare a man if he has a penis, but yet they don't want to call a trans man a man even after they've gone through they've gone
yes,
through sexual.
Reassignment.
Thank you. Could not
uh,
fucking remember that. So even their own arguments seem to fall apart.
right. I mean, you then get down into these sort of essentialist arguments. Well, is a penis that developed in a standard way better somehow than one that was surgically reconstructed?
Yeah.
So if you've got, for instance, a person who's intersex and has had have reconstructive surgery to create functional genitalia, is that some person somehow lesser? I
Yeah.
even if it's reconstructive surgery that brings the genitals into alignment with their chromosome arrangement, for for instance, are you going to
Yeah.
then say, well, that doesn't count? That's not a real penis? No, I presume they won't do that. You
Yeah.
never
Well,
know, though. They've got a lot of inconsistencies.
in secondary sexual characteristics, the vast majority of those are triggered by hormones. There's nothing in a person's body that would like in a male born biologically male with a penis in your body that's gonna prevent you under the right hormones to develop secondary female features. There's everything that they want to define as I mean, so then it does come down to the genitalia, which is kind of weird because that's nobody's business. They shouldn't. There shouldn't even be a question that people are asking you.
Mm-hmm.
That's another issue. Is we go through our lives and we're interacting with hundreds or thousands of people, and how many of them do you check their pants? How many do you look inside their underwear to see what they're
Yeah.
carrying around down there? And,
Like, that's fair.
almost none. Yeah.
The chat is saying you're a little low, PZ. Like they're having trouble hearing you.
Okay, I have a button I can turn. Is that a little better? I hope.
Yeah, you sound pretty clear to me.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, that was something he said that made me laugh out loud in that turf video. It's like, you never get to know what's inside my trousers, and
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and this is true for everybody. I've got all these students, and I haven't seen the genitals of a single one of them. Fortunately, right? Good thing.
right.
And I have no desire to. And
Yeah.
I'm just gonna treat them how they want to be treated, and that's how we ought to be dealing with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Are these people these people who want to make this argument? Are they volunteering their time to stand outside the bathrooms and do an inspection? Because that's what it's going to take. Because someone could express those traditionally male or traditionally female secondary sexual traits and not have the genitals down there that you're expecting, and that's with nothing, with no augmentation at all. People come naturally, all this spectrum, all across the
Right.
those traits. So,
and then what do we do with those people who insist it's not just simply genitalia, it's your chromosomes? Are they going to be standing outside the bathrooms doing chromosome tests?
Yeah.
right, yeah. Let me send this off to a lab, and we'll get back to you in a couple weeks. Then you can use the can.
Yeah. You either way,
Because just as I don't know anyone's genitalia except for a very small number of people, I don't know anything about most people's chromosome sets either.
You even mentioned that you don't know your own testosterone levels, and yet people want to judge, others by either their testosterone or estrogen levels, which is something that is, variant in everybody.
Yeah, and it's something that changes throughout your life. I mean, statistically, I probably have lower testosterone levels than I did when I was 20.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but yeah, I kind of expect that. And it doesn't perturb me at all, and it really doesn't matter, because it seems like once you reach a certain threshold, yeah, you're done. You're going to exhibit male behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's chromosomes. I mean, I don't know anybody's chromosomes at all. Like I've never met anybody and been like, oh, do you have a XX or an XY? It's never come up, and I've never felt like it was something I needed to know. Right along there with their genitals, of course. Well, there's been some people, but
although there actually are increasing numbers of people who do know something about their chromosomes. If you go through 23andMe,
yeah,
you actually come back with a little map of your chromosome set, and you can actually check it out and see if you've got an X and a Y, or if you have an X and an X. It'll show up. But again,
but it's still something that is personal to them. It's something that you shouldn't have to share with other people to prove anything about yourself.
Yes, and if you get on 23andMe, if you get into that system, they've got privacy controls So you can only see the chromosomes and genes of people who have openly released them.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
good.
I can't go snooping through all those people's chromosomes and say, oh, that's kind of nifty. Although it would be
It-
kind of interesting.
yeah, probably. You talked about how like our brains aren't very different, although they are dimorphic, right?
Not very.
Not very, because that's the thing. I read different studies that say different things that uh, brains can be the size of certain part. Like, obviously, this is not my area of study, but that there are slight variations between a male brain and a female brain.
Yeah, supposedly there are, and there are studies out there that show, like mentioned, certain nuclei of the brain show statistical differences between men and women. And interestingly, there have been studies that have found that homosexual people have intermediate characteristics in those things too. So
Yeah.
there's some wobble in there. But way back when I was an undergraduate, I was doing grunt work on one of those projects with mice, where the PI was doing all the brain slicing and all this stuff, and then he had undergraduates who would do things like measure cell sizes, and we would be doing that blind because that's good science. So anyway, I was one of the grunts that would just spend all day staring into a microscope, measuring cell diameters and building up tables of that. And the thing was, at the end of it, the investigator was able to say, yeah, there's a tiny little difference between male and female mice, but there was such a huge range. And here I am looking directly at their brains and measuring things down to the fraction of a micron, and I would not be able to tell you which of those brains was male or female.
So it's almost the same as like testosterone levels and stuff like that. Like
Right.
there is a large variation between everybody, so that
Yes.
there's no certain way to tell each other apart. There was one study that I read about how identical twins tend to, if one is trans, the other tends to be more trans, and they think that has to do with there being a genetic influence to transgenderism. Anything to say about that? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I really suspect that there are multiple, actually, genetic predispositions to, for instance, homosexuality, to transgender issues, that kind of thing. I
Mm.
I I would bet you that there are such things, but the data is really weak. There's not good, strong, believable evidence of that. And in particular, twin studies I have found really murky and dubious, because
Really?
Minnesota was one of the big centers for twin studies for many, many years.
Hmm.
And there were a bunch of twin studies done out of the Twin Cities campus.
That's
And
why we did our twin studies. I'm an identical twin, so I went through all my childhood doing those. My parents making bank off that, I guess.
Oh, I bet you didn't make that much money.
No, it was like just
Yeah.
they'd have us send stuff in a lot. I think we only had to go down there once or twice, but it seems like saliva samples and stuff like that. And
Yes, but were you separated from your identical twin?
separated.
Personally, did you live separate lives with different families and different
No.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the thing. So many of these you're going to have twins who knew each other through their childhood. Their family knew who they were. Their friends knew who they were. There was, twins also get some pressure to conform to each other. Things like that go on all the time. So it means they're kind of tainted. And the Minnesota twin study also really highlighted a few cases where they claimed that the twins were raised in isolation. And it wasn't true.
Oh, really?
Really? That people went through that data afterwards, and And yeah, they did find a few who were sort of loosely separated.
Hmm.
But generally, what happens is if you've got twins and they're separated, it's because there was some economic disaster or somebody died or something.
Yeah.
They don't just farm them out to random people.
Right.
They go to they go to the aunts and uncles, and maybe they're separated out for again for socioeconomic reasons, but you can't afford to
Yeah.
have two kids all at once. But they're still in touch. They still knew each other. They grew up in related families, and often under very similar conditions. Suddenly, it becomes really difficult to separate out what's
Yeah.
genetic and what's environmental.
Yeah, that reminds me of the psychological studies that they've done on transgenderism, because they had to throw a lot of them out because they tended to be, kind of skewed a certain way, and it you just can't really study it. You can't learn about the biology or the genetics or anything like that through psychological studies. It just doesn't work.
Yes. And I don't want to disrespect those studies entirely, because they picked the hardest topic to analyze in humans, and
Yeah.
they did the best they could, but there's so many possible interpretations of the results that I don't find them very credible.
Yeah.
The ideal experiment is we would separate them at the instant of birth, and we would isolate them totally, and we would not allow them to move them to separate sides of the country, and then we would manipulate their all these things you can't do with people, because
No, you can't.
somebody will object.
Because of ethics.
Yeah, you can do it with spiders, but not people. It's really annoying.
Right. Yeah. Sure that there's probably been a lot of tests done in secret that we will never know about, where with separating children and exposing them to different stimulus and stuff. But
That the Nazis did, you mean?
yeah, right.
Kind of what I was thinking. So
Yeah, it's not the kind of thing you can do ethically.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't want to say the Russians didn't do it. I don't want to say the U.S. didn't do it. I don't know, but I don't know about regarding. Well, do you think they did those kind of experiments with transgenderism? I think that was kind of more of a.
I just don't see the military application that would justify doing it by the government.
Yeah, during that time period too. Is I don't think that people who were experiencing any kind of gender dysphoria probably kept it to themselves if they didn't want to end up locked up, because they lock you up for a lot worse than that or a lot less than that back then.
Yes, and there was no profit in it, so the corporations weren't really interested. So yeah, everyone just suffered alone.
yeah.
Well, and there's so much stuff that we didn't know about back then that we can look back and see people getting frontal lobotomies and stuff for things that we can just treat now or
where do you see the future of is there a lot more to be able to understand and learn that you just having it? I know in my area of study we learn new stuff every day, and we're moving forward with it. Where do you see this area of study in terms of the actual biology of transgenderism going?
No, we're all done. We figured it all out.
Good for you.
Said no scientist ever. What the heck's going on here?
No, we got a long ways to go.
I figured.
It's in its infancy, right? I mean, you would say we're at the very beginning of that now, that we're just starting to understand that there's some science there instead of just
right.
Yeah.
Well, and also it's I think there's a growing awareness that you won't find the answers to everything in scientific studies, right? That there are so many complications here that we're moving into the realm of culture and art and sociology and psychology. And yeah, the kind of science I do, you grind things up and you separate out molecules and you look at those, and that's not where we're going to find the answer. And so when you ask where is the science going to go, I would hope that where the science is going to go is in respectfully distancing itself from issues that science should not play with.
That makes me one of the things that you said that was that questions on this subject should be resolved by scientifically informed transgender persons, and I really liked that a lot.
Yeah, because the people who have a stake in it, when I write grants and stuff, there's always this. You always got to use this word stakeholders, which I've come to hate. But yeah, that you gotta motivate and interest the stakeholders in the issue. And too often, one of the afflictions of science that's hit us hard for decades and centuries even is that we generally do things from the perspective of some dominant majority.
Yeah,
we white men get to decide everything.
What I do with my uterus. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you should be asking us men how that thing works and what it's for and what you're allowed to do with it.
I know.
And it's the same with transgender issues. It's same with homosexuality and all that kind of stuff. And the thing is that what scientists are used to working with things that are nice and discrete, and you partition them out into this is this domain and this is this domain, and we understand how these two things work, but they're not so good at figuring out what's going on in a rainbow, right? Aside from the refraction of light, at different angles by droplets, they can understand that. But a rainbow has this gigantic range of implications to people and society at large that we're terrible at analyzing that.
Yeah. There's nothing to actually get to and touch and do anything about. So
yes, and we're so tempted to do everything in a reductionist way where we tear it down to the small molecules. Yeah, like rainbows are made up of light refracted by drops of water suspended in the air, which is great. Yeah, it's nice to understand the physics of that.
Mm-hmm.
But what does it mean in a poem? You can't do that with science.
No.
And we ought to appreciate that. And
I think a good comparison would be like like Linnaean taxonomy. For the longest time we filed things away and into these 7 classes, and then we start adding little sub and super family and subclass and suborder and all this stuff, and it really comes down to it's a spectrum of life and of evolution of life that it's punctuated, but it's still a spectrum, and these classifications we've made for them aren't actually real. They're not. These aren't prescriptive. They're descriptive of what we're observing. And as we learn more, as our knowledge grows about any field of science, the terms are going to change. The arrangements are going to change. The more we know. So
climate
so
change.
Things like, we use these terms like phylum, and a phylum among animals is so different from a plant phylum.
Yeah.
Why are we even trying to link these two and compare them? They're arbitrary hierarchies, and
yeah.
Oh, for sure. Like there's as much genetic diversity within a single genus of beetles than there is in the entire order of primates. For instance, there's more diversity right there. So why don't they, or why aren't they the same level? It's because these things are arbitrary. They're what we primate centrist want to lump everything together in. So yeah, I mean,
You can almost connect it to this because just as you said, all the variations in people, it makes it arbitrary. It doesn't, there's so many differences. You cannot put everybody into a box and say this is exactly what it is because of X, Y, and Z. There are so many variations in us, whether it be our hormone levels, all of it, that you can't just specifically say, okay, well, you're a transgender person because you fit into this little box, or you're a cis male because your hormone levels are between X and Y. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And I think that kind of makes the science of it harder, but it also makes it much more interesting as well.
Well, people will deride you and say, "Oh, you just think you're a special snowflake." No, you are. Every single person is distinctly unique, across, but in multiple ways. So yeah, you are. If you have any doubt about it, you are a special snowflake. I'm sorry, but you are.
Yes, but we keep trying to shove people into categories, whether it's their gender, their sexuality, their race, their cognitive abilities, all these sorts of things. I think we're going to have a revolution when we start sorting out the autism spectrum, for instance, and we start discovering, there's not, surprise, there is not one way to think like a human being.
Yeah.
Right, and all those categories you just listed off there, people try to link those together, like, oh, your cognitive ability is related to your race. No, it's really not. No, and that was the running theory for what, 80 years.
Oh, I think it was longer than that. Yeah.
Scientifically, does race even exist in terms of like genetics and stuff?
Well, in a sense, it does.
Okay.
I mean, but it's not the way people think about it. So the races that people sort other human beings into are artificial and don't work. They don't fit.
Yeah.
Like, what you would decide is the black race. There's I think there's more under that blanket of sub-Saharan Africans haplogroups. There's more of those than there are on the rest of the planet combined. So
yes, and we keep insisting on using terms like Caucasian, but that's a nonsensical category. There's no such thing as a Caucasian unity group. That we're all very different from one another, and so so in that sense, race is nonsense.
Yeah.
In another sense, you could try mapping, relationships onto hierarchies, but even there, it starts to fall apart because you just go back a few generations, and we're related to everybody, and it's all just different degrees of mixture of people from this region with people from this other region.
Well, race itself, in the way that we see it, was first brought into literature in like the 15th century in order to justify the black slavery, pretty much, and that's where we built upon that. So,
and it's even more complicated than that because
I understand. I know that. I'm just saying that's in terms of separating it out between, what you said in terms of
right,
connecting us to our ancestors, as opposed to the popular, way that we see race. It is absolutely different. Like you said, Caucasian is just not real.
Yeah, I mean, because slavery existed for longer than we had racial categories.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, since about that time, 15th, 16th century, there was this
colonial era.
Yeah, there was a gradual hardening of the concept. People didn't think in terms of, oh, you're black and I'm white before then.
Yeah.
Blackness was invented as a justification for treating people differently.
Exactly.
Once they started expanding and these Europeans started exploring the globe a little bit and found all these different people groups. Well, they needed to be superior to them, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Well, now we come full circle from from talking transgenderism to talking about race, and we're all white too. We're all white, and
Oh,
I
we
actually have a
shouldn't kind of talk about
question
any of this.
about how when someone comes to you and says that being transgender is just not real, that a male is just born a male and a female is just born a female and that's it, and they can't ever change. What are the arguments that you present to them?
Well, like again, here I am, white heterosexual male, cis, and all that kind of stuff. And I try not to argue with people about this stuff. We've had a few instances at my university where the conservative student groups have come right out and said that they said, there's only two sexes. You're a boy or you're a girl, and that's all that counts. And it's not worth it to get into a public fight with them, because it just brings more attention to the nonsense they're spewing, and that's what they want, is they just want the attention. But yeah, the kinds of things we've done. So when that has happened on campus, my department has been uniform in their response, and that is to disagree strongly, say that's wrong. And we've done things like we've made up our own little flyers that we've posted around the building.
Wow.
That we've got, all of us right now are having, we got little signs on our doors about supporting LGBT equality and that kind of stuff. So we do that. There were a few editorials written to the student newspaper. But we're actually in a difficult situation there, because I can recognize that somebody has said something really, really wrong, but they're students, and I have authority over students.
Yeah.
So much as I would like to, I can't walk up to one and punch them in the face, right? That's off the table. And that what I have to do is I have to engage them politely. I mean, I can do things like, if they're in a class and they're writing a paper on this, I can point out the errors in the paper, and that can affect their grade. But that's
that's kind of
about
brilliant though, because you can put them in a place where it's like, okay, back up your claims here with some data and citations of where you're getting your information from. I mean, you can kind of corner them a little bit that way.
Yes.
So,
And it's the same situation with courses where students try to push back against evolution. Is no,
That actually
that's
happens? Holy shit.
only in
yeah.
creationist movies. It's not like that though. Are you the teacher sitting there up on your podium, and then the student comes up and challenges you, and everybody whips out their cameras and starts watching it?
Yes, and I shout at them and tell them, you're not allowed to say that, and I'm going to throw you out of the class. No, it's if it's a statement that is so ridiculous, but at the same time is totally irrelevant to the subject at hand, I will tell them to sit down. You can come to my office and talk to me. If it's actually relevant, that's happened a few times, and it's been great, because that means I've got an excuse to talk at length about why evolution is a superior explanation. Similarly, if it hasn't happened in any of my classes yet, but if the transgender issue came up there, I would treat it exactly the same way. Now, the problem there is, I'm at a liberal arts university, and we're also kind of an elite university for the region. And so we don't get much of that. Creationists, almost unheard of. They occasionally pop up in class, but not very often. And when they do, they tend to be aware of the fact that they're a minority and that their views are not well supported by science, maybe by their religion, but not by science. And similarly, on transgender issues, I have, I talk about it in genetics and I talk about it in development. And what's more likely to happen is an LGBTQ student is going to stand up and tell me where I'm wrong. And what I have to do is accept it. Yeah. Okay, you're the expert on this particular issue. I will gratefully accept your correction. And I'll make notes not to make the same mistake in the future. Oh, excuse me. So that tends to happen. But no, I haven't had much worry about my students being.
I think we're very
blamed.
lucky that the younger generations seem to be more accepting of things like LGBTQ issues and stuff like that, as opposed to
Yes.
the older people that grew up in a time when there were a lot more stereotypes and it just kind of stuck with them, and that's unfortunate, but it's hard to change people's
Right.
minds.
Well, the younger generation is not watching Fox News.
Yeah.
That helps a lot.
Well, the network TV is kind of unheard of to the Zoomers.
Right.
They don't.
Yeah. So they've got the right idea. We just have to convince them all to get out and vote every election.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh no, he said the V word.
I'm still wearing my sticker, so
Okay.
We've been joking all day about avoiding talking about the election, but you know what? It's happening now, and it seems like we have a pretty good turnout. So hopefully, for issues like the transgender issue that we're dealing with right now, let's really hope that
it
the way it
stops
heads.
the bathroom bills like they started in
Yeah.
in North Carolina and things like that, because it doesn't seem to matter that the science doesn't back up their
Yeah.
hate and their ignorance, and it's upsetting. So hopefully things will change if we can get enough
Right.
people to vote and say that what they're doing is wrong.
I refuse to make political predictions because I have been wrong for so long. I voted against Reagan. I was wrong there. I voted against the Bushes. I was wrong there. The last election, let's not talk about the last election. But, I got my fingers crossed. I'm hoping that we have seen the high water mark of conservatism. It's
Yeah.
going to start to ebb backwards. But
Well, this was a backlash against what could have been progressive if there hadn't been so much infighting in our government over the last 8 years before this last election.
right.
But
change the subject. Let's talk about something.
Well, I was going to say actually one of the things that you talk about in this issue and many others is that biology, you say, is blurry. There's no, and the same goes with climate science. There's a lot of gray area in between things. How do you work around that blurriness?
Oh, I love the blurriness, so I don't work around it. I embrace it.
Explain why you love blurriness then.
Oh, so for instance, one of the first lectures I give in my genetics class is to try and correct some of the misconceptions students come in with. And seriously, students come out of high school vaguely aware of Mendelian genetics, and they think that's how everything works, right? That every trait is defined by a gene, and those genes come in either dominant or recessive forms. And once you work those out, you figured everything out, and you can predict everything and across. And no, you got to tell them over and over again, no, that's not how it works at all. That every trait is multifactorial. There's multiple genes influencing it. And if you're in a college course in genetics, one of the first things you talk about is the fact that there's epistasis, where which genes you have at one locus and how they affect other genes at other loci. So the genetic background matters in the expression of individual genes. And then we talk about epigenetics. So there's environmental influences that alter the expression of genes. And pretty soon you start realizing it's a really mushy mess, but it's great because that's where all the fun stuff is happening. Is
Oh,
figuring
really?
out what's, oh yeah,
That's where the
yeah,
advancements come in, huh?
right. Well, and also it gets us away from that binary reductionist approach that I hate so much.
Yeah, it does.
Right. And it's why it's also why real labs are so important, because computer simulations and your textbook all tell you, oh, you do this cross and 75% will come out this way and 25, and then when you get into the lab, what you discover all of a sudden is, oh man, flies are really complicated. And you're sitting there with a bunch of flies, and if you work with flies long enough, they all start to look like individuals. Not
Really?
quite as much as humans, but yeah, you start to recognize, oh well, look at that little runty fly over there, and there's one that's pretty arrogant the way it's strutting around, and this one over here is just kind of sleepy. You just do that for a while, and you start to appreciate the complexity of the organism, and that's really important. Um, so much of the early work in genetics was trying to resolve clear cut differences. So like Thomas Hunt Morgan was so excited when he found his white-eyed fly, because it's a sharp distinction between the normal red-eyed fly.
Yeah.
And one of the early labs in my class, what I do is I get a whole bunch of mutants. So we bring in vermilion-eyed flies, scarlet-eyed flies, ruby-eyed flies, brown-eyed flies, all this other stuff. And you sit the students down and make them look at them and begin to realize, oh, these distinctions are more subtle than anyone expected.
Mm-hmm.
And that the students struggle at first, because seriously, if you put a fly in front of yourself and looked at, would you be able to detect subtle differences in the colors of their eyes? Probably not unless you spend a lot of time with flies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe Brian
do.
has.
Yeah, I could.
Yeah, but and then you start working with the students on this stuff, and they start to appreciate that there's like 10 to 15,000 genes in a fly. They all matter. They all
Yeah.
interact. And you get this really complex combinatorial phenomena going on. Just the fact that epistasis matters, and that fly genetic backgrounds are really important. And geneticists have known this since forever. Okay, as long as they've been working with flies. That's why geneticists work with well-defined background lines like Oregon R or whatever. And it was also true with zebrafish. So we had these specific lines that we worked with, that we'd known for 30 years, so that if we got a mutation appearing in that background, we could get more reliable outputs from it. And then
Are zebrafish a better control group since they're more homogenous than like what you're dealing with now with the spiders?
Oh, then spiders are nightmares. Come on. Natural populations are just, oh man, I've been butting heads against that for quite some time. But even within zebrafish, they've been inbred since I think the 1830s or thereabouts. And even within that deeply inbred group of animals, different strains have different properties, and you start to notice subtle differences between them. So there's all these little things that matter. Often they only matter a little bit. They might affect the degree of expression of a mutation depending on what background it's in, but the mutation is still recognizable. But this is a real effect, and it matters.
Yeah. Different shade of red. It's still a different shade of red, right?
Yes, and it's relevant to humans too, because humans are really good at recognizing subtle feature differences. Like, yeah, you're probably both great at noticing different eye colors in human beings, right?
Mhm.
especially with people that you're close to, and you know, look into your children's eyes or whatever, you know what color they are,
Yeah.
and it's different than that kid from down the street.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Even like
and
the little speckles. My son has my exact, the way my eyes are. So I notice every little tiny speckle in them. It's true.
yeah, so you know, if somebody stole away your children and tried to replace them with a clone, you would probably notice.
Like that part that time in Stranger Things where they tried to pretend that Will was dead and they had a fake Will and it was really well done, but his mother was like, no, that's not him. That's just not him.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I want to address a comment in the chat really quick about how the World Health Organization had previously classified trans as psychological, but changed it to biological in order to prevent suicides and increase acceptance. Yes, it's true. Um, Transgenderism used to be considered a mental disorder under the World Health Organization up until recently. I don't know if it was this year or like they said 2021 when it'll start, but I think that is a step in the right direction, saying that there is genetics behind this, there is biology behind this. This isn't just about what's going on in a person's head. So I just wanted to address that really quick.
And it's important to remember that things like homosexuality, for instance, was a mental disorder for the longest time, or considered a mental disorder. Certain other characteristics, like we were talking about earlier, that would have gotten you locked up in a mental health facility for the rest of your life.
Yep.
We move forward from there. It's okay to make progress in medicine, in healthcare,
and science.
And as far as transgenderism being in and of itself a mental health condition, I don't know if that was ever the standard, more so than that it resulted in some mental health issues.
No, they used to call it sexual
dysphoria.
Dysphoria, that's what it was. So that's what they were classifying it, and that under that classification, it was considered a mental disorder, and that was up.
Isn't gender dysphoria more of a mental response to a transgender condition than the synonym with the condition itself?
Just as far as what I read, that's what they were classifying it under. I mean, I could be wrong, but it's what I remember reading. That's how it was.
Oh, that's challenging that. Maybe I was behind on my terminology.
Yeah.
There's another bigger point to make there too, which is that, so many people try to say that, oh, science is objective. Just give me the facts. It's all concrete, cut and dried, and all that stuff. But the reality is that for a long, long time, the science has been used to enforce social norms. And that's a perfect example of it. There was no science saying that transgenderism is a mental illness. What there was a lot of cultural pressure, social pressure, saying, get these people to go away, put them in an asylum or something.
This doesn't match what we want, what we expect to see. So obviously disorder is what it comes down to.
But it's been here, as long as people have been doing science. It's not just transgenderism, but women, they're not as smart as men, right? And science is used to give this sort of objective veneer over a bias and say, well, it's just a fact that women are not. Charles Darwin indulged in that kind of nonsense, and it wasn't because he had done a thorough objective analysis of the differences between men and women. What he had to do was overlook the similarities to reinforce what his society was telling him over and over again. So it's just something to keep in mind is that when people say, oh, well, science backs me up on this, that doesn't mean what you think it does.
And updating that data point in the World Health Organization is not them saying, oh, it was a psychological disorder. It's saying that, you know, we looked back at this and this was a cultural directive more so than anything. It's not changing it. It's correcting it.
Mhm.
Yes.
And it's the same thing in climate science. You know, that's one of the great things about science itself. Even though this wasn't exactly science, them saying it was a mental disorder, but you know, when we're able to say that, oh, we were wrong, and move on from that and learn from that, instead of saying, you know, steadfast in some position regardless of what the data tells us. So
yeah, this comes up in arguments with creationists too, who seem to treat the fact that scientists will change their minds and modify their theories to fit the evidence as some kind of sin, that you're doing it wrong. You're not defending an absolute irrevocable position. You're actually being flexible and adjusting to the evidence. Oh, that's just terrible.
And to address the Maverick, just one real quick. We're not saying that science there's not science that has an agenda. Science shouldn't have an agenda. Has it in the past? Yes. If scientists in the past use science to push an agenda, yes, but that's not science. Science doesn't have any cognitive abilities at all. It's just a methodology.
Right.
So clarify that.
I'm going to disagree a little bit, because I think this is a real problem, is that too often people try to argue that science is impartial and objective, and maybe the abstract notion of science is, but scientists aren't. That the people who do science always have an agenda. If they're well trained, they're doing work to try and resist the impetus to follow up on their biases. But I'm sorry, even I have biases.
Yeah, we all do.
That's why the peer review process is so important. So you know, you put your biases. You don't have to worry about just your personal biases getting in the way. You can hand it off to another peer who might not have those biases. They might have them too, but you know what? They're going to hand it off to somebody else to check that again. So that's
so tragically, I have this belief that spiders are beautiful, and some people oppose me on that. Would you?
Dave,
I will peer with you that statement and agree wholeheartedly. Especially Electrodectus. Love you guys.
You're biased.
Spiders, you're definitely biased.
So are you.
Yeah, I know.
I freely admit it. Yep, I am.
There's one. I will address this one last thing from Maverick, and then maybe he can stop yelling in my chat. He asks what scientific evidence suggests the issue is biological and not psychological.
But why are you trying to force a distinction there?
I don't know.
I mean, you know, you just said a little while ago that I kept pointing out that things are blurry. Yeah, this is a great example that it's not one or the other. It's both, and they all kind of blend together. And
it was cultural too. So cultural in there.
Yeah. Sociology and psychology and biology and chemistry and physics, they all are aspects of the big issue, and we have to incorporate them all if we want to answer comprehensively.
Yes. Once again, it's not a black and white thing. There is a lot that comes into play here. What do you have to say when somebody tells you that like a human being cannot ever change their sex? That's something that comes up a lot in from TERFs.
Oh yeah, that's like the people who 140 years ago said humans can't fly. You can't have heavier than air flight, and what happens is they end up getting totally disproven within a generation, and that's going to be the key. Well, it's ongoing right now. People are changing their sexes right now. Gender reassignment surgery works. Hormone injections work. There are all these changes going on, and what's going to happen in the near future is, with stem cell research and better understanding of differentiation and development, Someday we're going to give people injections and do a little bit of, maybe a little bit of assistive surgery, and they will have entirely new genitalia. And who knows, maybe we'll even figure out how to transform a testis into an ovary and vice versa. And then what leg are you going to stand on, turfs? I mean, it's
Yeah. The same people that will say, if a woman can't have a baby, then they're not a woman. Well, what about women that just can't, or women that are postmenopausal? They don't fall into those categories. You cannot keep trying to put them. It's not a black and white issue, and put them into one box or another.
right. Yep.
Well, there's something to be said about when a zygote is developing. There's a reason that I have a penis and nipples, because I'm never going to need to feed my young with my nipples. But there was a point in time where, when I was being formed in my mother's reproductive cycle, I might have been female. So let's get these nipples ready in preparation. But that didn't happen. But it could have.
We could fix that with some hormone injections. Men can lactate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All these changes could happen. You never know. And the wonderful thing too is that I think as a technology and our understanding of biology progresses, we're not going to be limited to male and female. And then watch the fundies explode. Okay, when we start working on alternative genders, multiple genders in a single person, multiple sexes in a single person, when you can just switch with just a little preparation between one or the other. Oh, that's good. That's going to be fun. I want to live long enough to see that.
I do too.
Yes, I'm an old fogey, so I probably won't participate so much. I'm set in my ways, and as you know, people cannot change ever.
Nope, never.
But I would love to see it happen to society.
A couple questions from the chat was: do we start as female and become male? I guess if they're male, is the Y chromosome not a deformed X, or vice versa? Those are just chat questions. So.
Okay. No to both. Yeah, this again is another thing I try to get into my students, is that there's a common myth that everyone starts out as female and then we add male characters. No, women are just as elaborately differentiated as men. Just because they don't have something that sticks out and is kind of floppy out there doesn't mean that there isn't very specific morphologies and physiologies going on in women's genital region. So no, what we do is we go through what's called a sexually undifferentiated stage. So there's an early stage, and yeah, so it's, if you're a responsible developmental biologist, you don't say male or female. You say that's undifferentiated. It could go either way. Give it time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that doesn't happen. And then your second question was.
Wait, let me go back to it. Sorry. Is the Y chromosome not a deformed X, or vice versa?
Oh, no. I mean, that one gets a little bit more complicated. It's pretty clear that, evolutionarily speaking, our Y chromosome was once an X chromosome, and that primarily what it has done is shed genes that then get translocated to other chromosomes. And there's some really cool mathematical reasons for that. It's more favorable to be on anything but the Y chromosome.
Really?
So there has been a reduction in chromosome numbers, but it's not universal. I mean, some species have great big elaborate flourishing Y chromosomes. Others, yeah, it like us, it's kind of runty, kind of an intermediately tiny Y chromosome. What we can expect, though, is, you sometimes hear stories about, the Y chromosome is shrinking, and there will come a day when it's gone, and we're women will take over the world. Sorry, what's going to happen again then is we have a gene dependent sex specification. All that will happen is the SRY, that region of the chromosome that's responsible for initiating male sexual development, will get translated onto another chromosome, which will then become the X chromosome or the
Whenever you
Y
come on, you
chromosome.
always make me want to go back to school and study some biology. Like,
Oh yeah, there's tons of fun stuff out there on evolution of sex, and it's never as again, it's never as simple as you want it to be, and it's always kind of blurry. But
blurry, exactly. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
for climate science, you have a bunch of different scientific disciplines to encompass, and biology was one of them. But clearly, it didn't go far enough. I like learning about it from you. So,
yeah.
um,
Never too late.
I know, never too late. Brian, do you have any last questions for PC?
No, this has been great. I think we've covered everything. I didn't know if we got to get into talking about chromosomes, or thinking about all the different alignments that you can actually have that are not standard XX or XY, that people don't ever take into account when they're talking about these issues. For instance, you can have there's like it sounds funny, but triple X chromosomes that cause certain physiological features, and they're of course they're always female, but to be
Yeah,
like taller and
they're
skinnier and stuff like
subtle. Yeah, they're much more subtle. You know, in the 50s, there was a period where geneticists were just looking for these chromosome differences. And then, you know, it wasn't enough to just find the chromosome difference. You then had to associate it with a phenotype. And so there's a little bit of overrepresentation of that. For example, one really common thing was to associate these variations in Y chromosome with criminality.
Really?
So yes, so there are old papers out there that basically say the more Y chromosomes you have, the more likely you are to be a criminal.
Wow.
And you know, there's probably this grain of truth to that. That the more Y chromosomes you have, the more chromosome or abnormalities and difficulties you had in development. And so
Mm.
you know, uh, my old genetics professor studied some of this. What he said is, yeah, you get funny looking kids, FLKs. You're not supposed to use that term in
What?
the professional literature, but that FLKs are really common. And what happens is somebody will tie it to some major problem without ever thinking about the fact that, oh, you just called this innocent young child an FLK. That's going to affect their behavior. Again,
Yeah.
all this stuff interlinked: sociology, psychology, biology, it all work together. And
Hmm.
it's yeah, so I'm really doubtful about some of that older literature that says there are these distinct differences.
Yeah.
And there's some that definitely come up, and there are syndromes associated with these, but
yeah,
sometimes they're inflated.
right.
Precisely.
We start talking about chromosome disorders. That Down syndrome is the one that most people think of, but that's just one of dozens and dozens that we've identified over the years. And the some of this stuff I haven't seen any, like you were talking about stuff from the 60s and 70s. It seems like a lot of that research into those is kind of just stopped there. But I might be mistaken. But I see a lot of new
Yeah,
studies on.
yeah. The thing is that those older studies were often associated with something we talked about earlier. They were attempts to enforce social norms. So, can you find a reason to institutionalize this individual who
Yeah.
looks a little different than the other boys and girls? And
Hmm.
I think we've progressed. So we're now more interested in appreciating individuals for who they are, and not so much how well they fit into our stereotype categories, or at
Yeah.
least for some of us.
And those
And,
conditions are excellent examples of the way that genetics works and the way that things are passed down and the way life changes as it progresses. So it's beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also all that other stuff, epistasis and epigenetics, all that kind of stuff, those buzzwords I was throwing around. Yeah, they matter.
Yeah. They do. Like we said, there's no box we all fit in. There's no specific box that we fit in. Everything, there's gray area. Everything is blurry, and we have to keep that into consideration. So,
yeah,
You
people, they're all
not
different.
real science. Whoever said that in the audience, that's disgusting.
I don't.
Said what?
It's troll. Fuck them. It's fine.
Oh.
Talking about eugenics, yeah. That's an example of progress, though. If you look at eugenics, how far we've come in understanding genetics and the subtleties and the differences and how we can move forward with that. Yeah, that's a progress we made. That punctuates our progress. Not something we should look back to, something we should move forward from.
Precisely.
Yeah, it's also the only way you're going to get new insights. If you stop putting people in boxes and you start appreciating all the differences, those differences lead to new ideas about how genetics and development and biology work. If you ignore them or just pretend they're horrible defects, you don't get progress.
No, you don't.
You want to do some?
Do you have any?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask PZ if you had any final thoughts, but go ahead, Brian.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. Yeah.
Okay.
I never have final thoughts because all my thoughts lead to more thoughts, and then we'll never get done.
Well, you'll both be coming back on Sunday, so when we will be talking about evolution, fighting
right.
evolutionists with Arn Ra, Vice Rhino, Godless Engineer, me, and these two fellows. So that will be at 8 p.m. Did you remember that one, PZ? Or did I just?
Oh, I remembered. It's somewhere in my head. If you'd asked me to say what day and date, what day and time, I would have said, I don't know. I'm gonna have to go look at my calendar and figure that out. Well, that's a reminder. Okay.
Yeah, Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. So
okay,
I will be doing that.
I will try to be on time for that one.
It's not a big deal. We're never on time anyway. It's no problem. But now at least we know that you're coming, so we're good.
Okay.
How about you, Brian? Any last thoughts?
No, thank you so much, PZ, for coming. I will be doing later this evening, actually later tonight at 10 Central Standard Time, 11 for you, Amanda. I will be on Vandalia 1998's channel. He likes to talk about science, so we're going to look at the kind of the land race between tetrapods and arthropods to dominate the lands. So that's gonna be fun.
Okay, who's winning?
I think the arthropods had a head start, quite a head start.
Yeah. Are we gonna pass? We're not gonna pass them by. We're not adapted for that small niche that they're successful at. So
yeah, we were never even had a chance to try because they've been there since before we got here. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, PZ, for coming. We always love having you on.
Oh, thank you. And sorry I was eating my dinner throughout this. I hope it wasn't too distracting, but it was.
No, it was perfectly fine. So thank you everyone in the chat for stopping by and anyone watching later on. We have the science with me and Brian, BrainBug. So we will all see you next time. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great.